Hello, Lata. Thank you so much for joining our podcast. And before we start, I want to say that Lata's on a mission to create to bring magic into the experience of change. So it's a very hot topic today. So welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you. It's great to be here.
So why don't we start sharing a little bit about you, your background, your experiences?
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Lata Hamilton, and I come from Sydney, so sunny Sydney in Australia. And yeah, I guess I am a change leadership and confidence expert. I really love all things change, but that's not where I started at all. I actually started in marketing, and I did a media and communications degree, worked in advertising, worked in marketing, and also studied neuro-linguistic programming, so NLP and coaching. So by the time I got to change, like I had all of these other skill sets and stuff behind me, and so I kind of pulled everything into my change management career and my change management work, and I kind of pulled it all in, and yeah, was able to kind of make a new approach to change and a new way of thinking about change, a new way of leading change in organizations and of delivering it that's really focused on transforming people's experiences of change, of organizational change, so change that might be impacting them and their teams and things that are happening in organizations. So I actually talk more probably about change leadership than I do about change management. But yeah, I absolutely love what I do. And I love being able to bring in all of these different aspects and all of these different elements into the wonderful world of change. It's just absolutely fantastic. I have had a lot of experience in a lot of different industries as well. So I've worked in all different types of companies, from really small startups to massive, national and global companies with hundreds of thousands of people. And so, yeah, I kind of have that real diversity in terms of scale, but then also in terms of different industries. I've worked across financial services, insurance, consumer goods, government, retail, and like consult now with a lot of different companies, manufacturing and everything like that as well. So a lot of diversity there. And I think that's what's fantastic actually about change generally, like change leadership skills generally, is it's such a transferable skill. You can really take it to any country, any industry, any company, and any role that you're in. And so I've definitely had that experience behind me, and that's what I love, being able to do and bring to leaders, to teams, and to organizations. So yeah, I have my own consultancy, Passion Pioneers, and I also do change leadership training as well for students and leaders who want to learn more about change.
I am so passionate about skills that are transferable, skills, what I call skills for life,
Yeah.
skills that you use no matter what, that you will need at some point in your life. Everyone will need. And that's why I'm so passionate about assertiveness, because it's one of those skills. But change is another one of those skills that people don't learn these things. And everybody can benefit from change leadership, be it in their work. If someone is a leader, they manage a team or they manage a project, they will need change leadership skills. It is an essential part of the job, but yet they didn't teach that in my MBA. They didn't teach that at school. Our parents don't teach that. It's a wonderful skill to have, and it's just so relevant for anyone, any position, personal or professional life. Being a change manager or not, we're all experience change. It's especially with the world that we're in right now that
Mm.
is changing so quickly. There's so much uncertainty. Uncertainty means change, but it can be a good thing. And I love that you bring the spark of magic into it.
Yeah. And if we think about, like you mentioned, sort of the pace of change in our personal and our professional lives, and I was having a conversation with my parents the other day, and they were talking me through what it was like to go to a drive-through in like the, I don't know, 60s or 70s, like a drive-in movie kind of thing. And they're like, yeah, so you would get like the speaker, and you would like put it through your window and hang it off your window, and then you'd wind your window up so the speaker would, and that's where the sound would come through. And I'm looking at them and I'm going, I'm like, now you have the movie on your phone in your pocket. Like the difference between those two experiences is just so massive, right? Like you used to have to go and like get like a wired speaker and hang it in your car to go to a group movie, like a public movie, and now you can literally watch a movie, on your phone in your like from your pocket. And I just said to them, I'm like, the amount that's changed in your lifetime is just massive, and like the pace of change, it is really hard for our psychologies to keep up. It's really difficult for us to be able to cope with the sheer pace of change, and the expectation that we will just get on with it. We will just go ahead and just do it. And, I like to define things really simply. So if we were kind of looking at what does change management mean, organizational change management, for anybody who, hasn't learnt this stuff, which is almost everybody. Before I moved into change, I didn't know anything about it. And so like I like to define things really simply. So it's like moving people from doing things in one way to doing things in a new way. And we do that through communications, training, and business readiness. And we don't just do it for the fun of it. We do it in order to realize the business benefits of the change. So we do it in order for there to unlock the value as to why we're doing it. It can be any kind of organizational change. It can be a new process, a new system, technology, platform, application. It can be a new team structure or a new operating model. It could be a new product or a new service, taking away a product or service. It could be the move to remote work or the move back to the office, which I think is a change that everybody in the world has experienced. And so like we're talking about these kinds of changes, especially the digital technology transformations and change, because often what they are doing, especially in organizations, is they're planting the seed for all these other changes to happen off them. So for example, like when you implement a new technology or a new digital platform, you might then end up having to change the structure or the operating model. You might then have to change, like the way that you offer your services. You might then have to change the way that you work with your team, or the way that your team works with their customers or their clients. So like the pace of technology change specifically, I think drives almost like ripple effects of other types of change in our organizations as well.
Yeah, and it's interesting that I've been seeing all these articles around the new reality of hybrid, and a lot of leaders are struggling with, okay, well, how do I manage in a virtual world? And there's a lot of companies that are providing new technological solutions to deal with that, and that's fundamentally changing the way people are being managed in companies as well. So that's on top of all the restructuring that's happening in all the companies in terms of, the different jobs and that used to exist, they're changing now, plus the technology, plus the way people interact. It's massive.
It is massive. And I think it can feel a lot in organizations like change is being done to you, like you didn't have a choice. So, COVID is obviously a great example of that, where almost probably the world over, governments essentially were mandating that the organization changes that way. So sometimes as a leader, it might feel that like you're being told what to do. You're being told you have to change. You're being told you have to lead your team through the change. It might be, a regulatory or compliance change. It might be a new project or a new transformation, or because it's being driven from a new strategy or a new operating model for the organization. So you're being expected to just pick this change up, and you're being expected to be comfortable yourself with it and jump on board. It's like automatically assumed as a leader that you will. But then B, you're expected to then lead that change for your people, and you're expected to be the everything to your people, and to give them all of the comfort and all of the confidence that they're going to survive this change and that they're going to make it through. And change, we are literally hardwired to not like change. Like human beings prefer stability. It keeps us safe. It keeps us secure. And this is a little bit of that like NLP stuff kind of coming in, neuro-linguistic programming. It's like we're hardwired to want things to stay the same, so that we can feel like we can achieve, so that we can feel like we can progress, so that we can feel like we can get all of our base needs met. And when change comes knocking on a team's door or a person's door in an organization, what really gets triggered is a survival instinct. It's really about that fight, flight, freeze response, because people just don't know what it's going to mean for them. They don't know how it's going to affect them. They don't know how it's going to affect their ability to do their job. They don't know how it's going to affect the way they look to other people. Are they going to be able to get on board with the new process or get on board with the new technology? Are they going to be able to use it for themselves? Are they going to look silly? Are they going to, is their job going to be made redundant? And when you start thinking about jobs being made redundant, for example, that truly is a survival thing. Like you're taking away somebody's livelihood. Like if we think about the word livelihood, you're taking away potentially their view of their ability to be able to provide food, shelter, and all the base necessities for themselves and their families. So it's very emotive. Like changing organizations is very emotive. And so often we can feel like it's being sort of pushed on us, and it's this real negative experience where people feel very powerless, they feel very afraid, full of fear, full of like very vulnerable, and that their own power and autonomy has been taken away, rather than feeling empowered and like they have had a say in it, and that they chose the change for themselves. So as a leader, it can be really hard to lead your team through that. I guess sometimes if a leader is coming up with their change, like they've got the vision for the change and they can see the real need, and they've actually kind of created the change, I guess. Maybe then their team it's a bit easier for the team to come on board because they might trust their leader. So they're like, yeah, I believe what you're saying and I'm going to come on board. But especially for changes that maybe come from somewhere else, or from somebody else, it can really feel like change is just being shoved on you, and pushed down to you, and that you have no hand in it whatsoever in your own place and role in the change and your own future even.
Yeah, it's it can be a scary thing, and scary experience for both, I guess, the leader and the team. And I think that's where a lot of really good management, so change management, but also communication is key. And one of the things that, in this situation where there's so much there's change happening, it can be difficult. It, like you said, it's the livelihood of people that we're talking about. How do people, leaders, but also the team build that strength and that skill to have, and get into those hard conversations that need to happen in order to get through change, and not just get through it, not survive, but actually thrive.
Yeah, I love that. And it is that whole, not just surviving the change, thriving through the change and being able to create for themselves a new future, a new opportunity, and to actually open up their life to the power of the transformation that the change can bring. So I love that kind of that phrase, like thriving, not just surviving. I think it's really sort of fit for purpose when it comes to change. And I like to provide like kind of practical tools for people rather than just talk kind of waffly about change sort of thing. I like to go, what can you practically do? What can you put into practice to really help yourself and help your team get through this? And for me, I think so much of it starts from internal. So much of it starts from building up your own confidence, which is why I love the topic of assertiveness. It's like, building your own confidence, your own inner strength within yourself, and starting from there. So before you go to lead change with anybody else, it's like, how can you set yourself up as the strongest person possible and really build that internally? And I like to say there's kind of 4 things that you can do. You can get really clear and really confident on these 4 things for yourself. The first is who you are. So that real kind of self-awareness around, who are you? What are you good at? Like, what do you love to do? Where do you thrive? Where do you shine? When do you get into that state of flow? Like, what do you bring to the table that nobody else has? Like, what's your unique selling proposition? So like, who are you? The second thing is, what do you want? What do you want? Because it's very easy, I think, especially as leaders, and especially probably even as female leaders, we can often be thinking more about other people.
Yeah.
And what do they need? What do they want? How do I serve them? How do I support them? It's just as important to really be clear on what you want, because if you think about everybody being a reflection of you, you need to have that clarity and that confidence that what you want is important and that you matter and that you are worthwhile as well, that you have that worthiness within yourself too. So really getting clear on what it is that you want through everything, through your career, your leadership, and your life. What is the experience that you want? What are the practical things that you want? Like, what's the salary, the pay, the income that you want? What's the type of lifestyle that you want to lead? How do you want to set up your leadership in your life? So it's, who you are, what you want. And then it's also about what value you bring to the table. So you are starting to kind of get into, I guess, kind of like what it is for other people, but it's like, what value do you bring to the table? That kind of goes back to like, what are your skills? What are your passions? And what are you really good at? But it's instead of kind of flipping it and going, here's what I can do for people. Here's where I can really help other people, and being really clear on like what value I'm able to bring to an organization, a team, a project, or whatever. And then the last one is, like what you're worth, being really clear what you're worth. Because if you feel, underpaid, overlooked, taken advantage of, never given the opportunity to have a seat at the table, never given the opportunity to speak your true thoughts, or to be invited in, then that's going to reflect in the way that you lead. So your self-worth and your worthiness and like what you are paid and how you're setting yourself up, that all comes into you building that strength as a leader and building that confidence within yourself. So it's like getting clear and confident on who you are, what you want, what value you bring, and what you're worth. And by doing that, it's almost like you arm and armor yourself to be able to lead change for other people, to be able to bring the experience of change to others. And it's almost like people often think it's the opposite. It's like when change happens to you, that's when you become strong, you become resilient, you build that, you build that thick skin, you build that muscle. But it's the opposite. It's like build yourself up first. And the experience that you have and the experience that you're able to take other people through will be so much more positive, so much more vibrant, so much more empowering for people. And you'll provide a completely different energy and a really different attitude and approach to the change that you're trying to lead. So it really is about kind of like building up your own strength. And you mentioned earlier, like communication, for example, like communication skills. The truth is like, well, my personal view is a lot of managers are not necessarily leaders. They're not necessarily leaders. Like they might have risen to the role of a manager because they had the technical skill and that was the next step. Or they might have risen to the role of a leader because they've been in the organization or in the industry for a long time. So tenure. So there was the next logical step, with little understanding around whether or not they actually have the desire and the drive to be a leader, because being a leader is really about going in and empowering other people and giving them the skills and the tools to be able to set themselves up and to shine. And it's like, I like to say, it's almost like achieving through others when you're a leader. So for some managers, in order to be able to go and have some of those difficult conversations in change, I will give you some examples. Like, I think that having difficult conversations, having that ability to speak the truth and to have an open and honest conversation with your leader, with another peer, but especially with your own team members, it is the number one risk to successful change. The number one risk to change landing successfully and embedding successfully in a team or in an organization is the ability to have those difficult conversations about what that change is, what it means to a person, and what it could mean for their future. And a lot of people, especially if they didn't necessarily choose to be a leader, they don't want to have those kinds of conversations. They don't want to have that conflict. They don't want to, kind of not be liked. It all comes kind of down to a fear of rejection. It's like, I don't want to hurt that person's feelings. I don't want to be told that I'm, B word kind of thing. I don't want to rub people the wrong way. I don't want to be seen as the bad guy or the bad girl. And so because of that fear, like sometimes people are willing to, like leaders are willing to just like put their own performance and success and future on the line especially when it comes to organizational change, because they're just so scared to have those conversations. But it's like the number one thing that you could do to lead change successfully is to actually build that confidence and that ability within yourself to actually be able to have those difficult conversations. So when we come to the communication skills and having those difficult conversations, in NLP we say there's no failure, only feedback. And it's sometimes it's learning that. Like, I did a media and communications degree. I know how to do communications. I've worked in marketing and stuff before. And so really, like, kind of build the skills to have communications, build the skills to be able to do that. And then the last thing I would say is learn some coaching skills as well, because coaching is not about telling somebody what to do. Instead, it's actually about giving other people the ability to be able to choose for themselves what to do and what they want and what to do next. And it's actually taking them on a journey. And it's a really different way of, instead of sort of directing, it's actually about inspiring and about inviting people into the conversation. So even learning some coaching skills as well could be really, really handy to be able to arm yourself to have those difficult conversations.
Yeah, and I think those are all really good points. And obviously, I love the communication part. I've in every single company I've been at and I've worked at, I've witnessed restructuring, and often restructuring at even levels above me, but also, the things that affected my team, but definitely a lot at the higher levels of the organization. And based on what I would hear the rest of the team, saying, it was usually this dissatisfaction with the way they were being talked to or the communication that they were getting. So like, oh, well, this is uncertain. Like, they're not giving us any information. They're not telling us when they're going to give us information. They were really unhappy, not with what the change was. They were unhappy with how they were being treated in terms of how they were being communicated to. They thought that the leaders weren't being clear enough and transparent enough and thoughtful enough around them and their needs, like you said, because they wouldn't give them any information until it was like right at the moment. And I know that obviously leaders, when these big restructuring changes happen, they can't give out all the information, but they can manage expectations. And they usually don't do that very well.
Yeah, like just giving a timeline can
That's
be
right.
like, okay, cool. Like, we can't give you all the information here, but here's when you're going to be able to find out, or even just making a commitment. We're going to keep you informed along the way, but then sticking to that, keeping that promise. And a really handy tool that I love to teach my students is actually, it's like a kind of like an empathy practice that you can do where you and see the world through their eyes. Feel what they're feeling. Like you're kind of in their body and you can feel what they're feeling. What could be the self-talk that's going through their head? What could be the fears that are coming up for them? How's their body feeling at this time? What could they be thinking, feeling? What kinds of conversations might they be having with their family, and or with their peers or their colleagues or their friends, or just themselves, even just their own self-talk. And then you can always, float out of them and come back to you. And then write communications from that place. Write communications from a real place, not from a place of, oh, we've got to speak the company line. We've got to make sure that we don't give away too much. We've got to put boundaries on what isn't acceptable. There will be things that you're not allowed to potentially share. A lot of especially big transformations and organizational changes can be very confidential. There are reasons for that. And sometimes there's also legal requirements for things like that too. That's understandable, but write the comms from an energetic place where you are empathetic.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's very important. And that would help a lot of people. And also helping people see, or their team see, change as an opportunity, not just this terrible thing that's happening. Because it's the reality. When change happens, usually things shuffle around. And the smarter you are about it, the better you are at actually grasping these opportunities when they're being shuffled around. Now, there's a lot of uncertainty in the process, and I know that that's something that I would do. I would usually when these restructurings, these big changes were happening, and I knew it was going to affect me. I'd actually go to my boss very often. I'd get really close to my boss, like best buddies.
Yeah.
And I would go at the end of the day when I knew he was more relaxed, and I just chat with him, and I'd get so much information.
Very proactive approach, right? Like you're going, this is going to happen whether I like it or not. And how can I get the best outcome out of it? So it really, like that's really being proactive and taking a very empowered approach. And obviously it speaks volumes to you as well that you had built such a great relationship with your leader, that they trusted you to be able to have those conversations. And yeah, like very strategic. So like, well done. Because that is, and I love to say, like, so restructures specifically, they're usually behind closed doors and very confidential for a long time, but they're the worst kept secret.
Yeah.
Everybody always knows. So it's like, instead of trying to pull the wool over your people's eyes, be clear and upfront. They're usually the worst kept secret, and you actually can do more harm than good by not speaking truthfully, by not speaking openly, by not just being transparent about it. You can actually do more harm than good. So there is an element of probably unlearning sort of these tactics and these tricks, these kind of like managerial tactics and tricks from the past, and taking a new approach to the way that you lead change. Like, taking a really people-centered approach, but also just an authentic approach. And like I mentioned, like being authentic in yourself means that you then invite and you become a role model for your team to be authentic too. And for them to be able to think about for themselves, like, okay, great, what can this mean for me? Of course, it's always going to suck. It's always going to suck. Where is that silver lining? Where is the opportunity? Where is the future that's possible if I'm able to move myself past the grief, the loss, the pain, the hurt, the outrage of the initial moment of change, and actually move myself to what could this mean for my future in a really kind of empowered way.
An empowered way, and inviting the team to feel comfortable speaking up, and having those conversations. I've seen some pretty terrible things, like during these times of change, people would just suddenly, there would be like these, okay, 50 people today, 100 people tomorrow, 200 people the day after that. You guys are fired and then rehired at a lower level with a lower salary the next day or the next week. And it's just a surprise. People don't have the time to prepare, for what that represents to them. And I think being able to encourage the team to speak up and say, okay, here, what do you actually need right now? What are you looking for? I mean, of course, if you ask what they're feeling, they're going to say apprehensive, like scared. But I think that helps the empathy exercise that you suggested as well. If there is that level of empowering the team to actually speak up and share a little bit about, and like you said as well, when the leader shares how they're dealing with the changes, that also empowers the team to share how they're dealing with it and what their hopes and dreams are.
Yeah. Especially with those changes that feel like they're coming to you and you're just expected to sort of cascade them. So maybe the changes that you didn't specifically create, you can really feel like, like you can be open and honest with your team about it, but you should also be supportive of the change, because ultimately there is a reason that it's happening. And it might be, these 100 people are going to need to lose their roles so that the entire company can stay operating. So there is a level of that too, but it's finding what's true to you and being willing to have that conversation and having it as a conversation rather than it being pushed as a one-way.
Absolutely. Could you share some examples of what having these difficult conversations around change would actually look like?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think something that I've noticed in my vast career and vast diverse background of change is sometimes it's the changes that you least expect that can have a massive reaction for people. So even something as little as like a little process change You might need somebody to say, for example, always do this thing before they start their work. And it's a compliance thing. You're getting, you could potentially get fined because of it. You know what I mean? Like it could be the littlest thing, but these people just don't do it. And you can sometimes think to yourself, oh, this is such a little change. Surely people will just do it because I tell them to do it. And it's not the case at all. Instead, it can create a lot of emotions. And when you do sort of some of that empathy, that kind of empathy practice, you might find, oh, well, people feel like they're being tracked if they have to hit that button before they start, or they feel like you're going to watch every move, or they feel like you're going to judge them if they don't do something fast enough. So like really you have to think about every little thing that you might be asking somebody to do differently could have all of these beliefs and fears and issues like linked to it from their perspective, even if you don't see that for yourself. Another really good example is for example, if you have a system, like this happens with digital technology change all the time, the quality of the data going in impacts the ability to use the system and any of the reporting, dashboards, business intelligence coming out of the system, potentially even automation of processes and things like that coming out of the system. So you have to have quality data in. So again, you might be asking people to, for example, input their rosters or input their working hours or input their how much time they spent on blah or whatever it happens to be. And that can be a really difficult emotive conversation for people where they feel like they're being judged or you're impacting on their life or whatever. And so you're almost like taking it from being almost like a professional conversation or a organizational conversation to a private space, to a personal conversation. And you're kind of almost always bridging that whenever you're having a conversation with somebody, even in a professional setting, they are a whole person. They're bringing that personal aspect into the conversation too. And whatever they're doing at work can impact their personal life and vice versa. And so like these are the types of difficult conversations that you could be facing. And then obviously the one that we've been speaking about this a little bit, but operating model changes, restructures, redundancies, layoffs, all of those sorts of things are very, very emotive for people. And the bridge between what's happening in their professional life and what that could mean and impact for them in their personal life can be, completely interlinked, completely interwoven, to the point like you could have some individuals, like to show you how difficult this conversation could be, you could have some individuals who believe that their spouse won't love them anymore if they lose their job. That's how much like people's professional lives and personal lives can be interlinked. And you're like sitting there going, no, we're just implementing a new system or we're implementing a new process and we don't need you to do these roles and responsibilities anymore. It's got nothing to do with that. But for some people, their entire identity, self-worth, and self-value is wrapped up in their role and their ability to provide for themselves and their family. Those are the kinds of things that you're having to walk in with and to deal with. And so to have those sorts of difficult conversations, it can be really hard. And that is why being a really strong person in yourself and having solved some of those, not solved, but understanding and having the awareness of some of those things for yourself, then having the empathy of some of those things for other people. So you could approach some of those conversations in any of those, whether it's a process change, whether it's, about data quality, whether it's about like a restructure or an operating model change or a redundancy. You can approach some of those and actually talk openly about the fact that you know that this is really hard. If you've been through it in the past, share, I've been through this. Or, I can feel what you're like. I can't obviously feel exactly what you're feeling, but I know I've been through this and it was hard for me. And really inviting them to share, what's going on for them, making sure that any support or resources are there, and really talking through with the person, like, what does this mean for you? What questions do you have for me? What would you like more information about? Like, maybe not even necessarily like how does this make you feel, but if you're comfortable with that, how does this make you feel? But if you have other support resources, like coaches or EAP or like an employee assistance program or something like that, or an outplacement service, making sure that you show that those things are available and there. And just having an open, honest, frank conversation and not shying away from the personal side of this. Because if you shy, it's not your job as a leader to solve every problem for every individual. It's actually not your role. Like, this is my personal view. It's not your role to be the everything to your team. It is your role, however, to be open, be transparent, be clear about what it means for their job, their role, and their responsibility, whatever the change is, to provide whatever support and resources are available, and to invite people to take that journey for themselves. And I think that there are a lot of leaders, this is where some of that fear around difficult conversations comes up. There are a lot of leaders out there who think that it's all on them and that there's nobody else who's going to be able to help them, and they've got to tackle all of the professional and all of the personal stuff that's going on for a person around the change as well. And that's not accurate. Like, don't take more responsibility than you have. You already have a lot of responsibility as a leader. You have legal responsibilities. You have, as an employer responsibilities. You have, duty of care responsibilities and things like that. You already have a lot of responsibility. Don't take on more than your fair share, because it not only puts you at risk and your people at risk, but also it's not your place. But still be aware of it. Point them to those other options or resources, and be aware of it, and be conscious that that might be happening for people, and make sure that that conversation is really open and really transparent, and that you are inviting a two-way communication rather than it just being, yeah, cool, your role is going to be made redundant in 4 weeks or 3 months or whatever it is. This is the process that you're going to go through. Full stop. No, nothing. Nothing else to kind of support that person through the processing that they might be going through because of the news that you've just given them.
I think also, I also think that a lot of leaders are scared of drama. So if they open up and start talking, if they sound serious and like they have a wall between them and their employee is not going to ask them any questions. They're not going to have drama. They're not going to bring all those personal issues to them. And I think it's very uncomfortable to have all of that
bottled up.
Yeah, it's like, I don't want to deal with that. So I'm just going to stay really serious and formal and build a wall and distance myself as a leader here from the team. In that way, I'm not going to get too involved into what's going on and into their lack of happiness around what's happening. I think that's part of it. I think there's other people maybe that I'm thinking more kind of people pleasing type might. What you said, I think, is absolutely true. Some people are going to take full responsibility for everything. And I think other people are just going to be scared because they don't know how to handle those conversations, and they don't know how to handle the emotions, and they don't know how to handle the crying. They don't know how to handle the fear. And so if they open up that gate for dialogue, it's going to pour in, and they're going to be overwhelmed as a leader, and they're just not going to know how to deal with it. And they're already feeling overwhelmed themselves, and they're like, oh my gosh, it's too much. So I think it's a challenge. But what you shared in terms of the questions that the leader could be asking their team members, I think is true as well. And what it made me remember were situations where, as a new leader in a new role in a new team, you want to get known, you want to do things different, you want to change things. And the reality is that the average time that people spend in a position is getting shorter and shorter and shorter by the day. So people used to stay in one company, one job for 10 years, and now they stay in a job for 2 years, and soon it's going to be 1 year. And that means the team is going to see change every single year, because every time a new boss comes through, And all my bosses have been changing like every 6 months, 1 year max, they're moving on. And you get another boss that you didn't pick, that you didn't choose, and then you just get them. And they have an agenda. They want novelty. They want to leave their mark. And the more change they can bring, the better for them. But that's
Yeah, it
hard
becomes
for
almost
the
like a
employee.
status symbol, right? Like if I can bring new change into the team, then I'm going to be applauded and rewarded.
By the higher ups, by the senior leaders. And the example you gave, actually we experienced that, which is one of these big changes happen. A new leader came in, he's like, I want to make things different. First thing, everybody's going to have to log in absolutely everything they do in a one of these project management tools like
Yeah.
Asana.
Yeah.
Everything you do has to be there with the timelines, everything, and we're going to be monitoring it every single week and day. People hated it so bad because they felt like they were being micromanaged. So all those things, what you said, the questions that you shared, um, where the leader opens up the dialogue and says, hey, what do you need? What are the questions that you have? And just be
And if
open about
comfortable,
it.
how are you feeling? Like, I know it's early days. How are you feeling? Happy to check in with you in a couple of days. Like it is just that it's that invitation, and then knowing that you're not just walking away, that you're not just like, again, like, you don't have to be everything to every one of your employees, and you probably shouldn't be, because that does start to really kind of blur the lines around your responsibility. But it's simply about having that care, having that empathy. But that care and that empathy comes from a place where you genuinely feel that way. And you mentioned about the leaders changing over so often. And the thing is like, I change jobs all the time because, well, when I was in my career, like, I changed jobs all the time because I would work on projects. So I've worked in many, many, many different companies, many different projects. I actively sought variety and growth by going to these different, working on things where I would change all the time. And I've had to learn how to build relationships super quickly, super, super quickly. Within like the first couple of days / first couple of weeks, I've had to build whole relationships with whole project teams. So it is possible to do that. I think, though, what happens, especially when it comes to organizational change, is people try to build those relationships at the time of the change. You need to be building those relationships all the way through your time. Like, don't wait for like when something big is happening to then care. It's about caring from the beginning and then building those relationships and building that trust so that when change comes knocking, it doesn't feel always like these huge sort of peaks and troughs, peaks and troughs. Instead, it's like, okay, cool. Yep, we've got this, like, I like to call it like the undercurrent of change acceptance. We've got this base level of acceptance, of trust, of, comfort with things being a little bit variable or a little bit flexible, so that when something bigger happens, like a really kind of big organizational change, or even just a small process change that could have, very real impacts for an individual, that doesn't feel so confronting all the time. So it's like it's almost like building up that strength, building up that skill, building up those relationships over time. And that will, again, sort of pave the way for future changes. You know that change is going to come down the line. You know it. It's a given. Don't be surprised and shocked when you're expected to either roll out the change for somebody else, the leader-led change for somebody else, or when you're like, oh, I know I'm going to need to do something. Don't be surprised or shocked about that. But instead, feel happy that all of the groundwork that you already laid means that you know that the way that you lead that change for your people, you're going to be able to give them an experience that's going to feel supportive, that's going to feel collaborative, that's going to feel potentially even co-created and co-designed, and that they're going to feel like they are empowered in the process. And a tool that I really love, in order to be able to transform the experience that people have of change, one of my very favorite tools, I am a coach, so I love this one, is vision setting. So actually having people come up with a vision. So in change, we're pretty good at kind of coming up with the vision of like what the change is going to mean for a company and an organization, or for a team as a group. But I like to kind of take it a step further with what I call the engagement formula, where you have the group vision, or the team vision, but then you also have a personal vision. So like I teach this process in my course, Leading Successful Change, and I teach how you can come up with the group vision, but then also how you can then teach and train people to come up with their own personal vision of what the change is going to mean for them. And like I recommend to my students, I'm like, set them up. Like, so like you'll have done the background in like before you announce or before you talk to your team about what positive future you see this providing, what positive experience and process and ways of working, change, and all of the positive benefits that people are going to get from this organizational change that you're going to be leading as a group. Then maybe not the first conversation you have, but as part of your change journey that you lead with your people, run personal vision setting workshops. Invite them to think about what the future looks for them. Because with the engagement formula, group times personal, that's where the magic happens. You end up with this top-down leader-led vision, which is consistent across everybody. And, it's very collective. It uses we, us, our language. And it feels like we're all in this together, and we're all in this journey together, and we're all moving to this, bright future together and this improved future together. But then you are really coming in on that personal, empathetic level, and you're empowering people to think about for themselves what it's going to mean for them, for their career, their leadership, and their life. What is it going to mean for them? And that's a grassroots bottom-up approach. So you've got top-down leader-led, grassroots bottom-up, and the magic happens in the middle. That's how you get consistent and aligned positive experience in change throughout. And so often I see the group vision done and the personal one just completely ignored. But that is really where the magic happens, is getting people to start to own the change for themselves. Exactly like you mentioned, it's like, what can I get out of this? Where am I going to go? This is happening whether I like it or not. What's the opportunity for me? And people won't probably be able to do that in the first conversation, maybe not even in the first week or few weeks, but invite people to give them the opportunity to have that experience for themselves and to decide for themselves and empower themselves around what their future could look like.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that was the last question, right?
Yes.
Good. Okay. So I'm gonna then get to the call to action for you to talk about.
Yep.
All right. Well, that is the magic of change and how to bring the magic. So there's bringing in the personal side, encouraging the team to bring in their personal side, bringing your own personal side, aligning that with the organization and the goals for the organization, and then finding the magic in between. I love that. So you're doing a lot of things. You have a lot of things to offer for around change. Could you share a little bit of that with the audience?
Yeah, absolutely. And you can probably tell that I'm pretty passionate about change, but I'm also really passionate about empowering other people to be able to lead change the way that I've led change, but also with their own flair and their own style. So I do offer change leadership training, executive coaching, and change consulting services. But like what I mentioned is it all starts with you. So like I have this free underpaid and overlooked coaching action guide, which you can download for free from my website. So latahamilton.com. And this underpaid and overlooked coaching action guide helps you to really do some of that early tool that I explained, who you are, what you want, what value you bring, and what you're worth. Helps you to do that and really earn your worth and build that internal strength in for yourself and that internal confidence. So I'd say definitely go and just grab that, no matter if you're a leader, if you're not a leader, if you want to do change leadership, if you don't, like whoever you are, whatever you're doing, whatever industry you're in, that is like such a powerful guide to have at your fingertips and to just put some of that stuff into practice and, arm yourself and armor yourself for changes in the future. And then if you do want to go deeper, would love to have you on Leading Successful Change. That is my change leadership program. So you can find out more at my website, latahamilton.com. And if you're a leader and you do have a team that you want to either build their change capability, or you need help leading a change that might be coming up in the future and you want, to inquire about my consulting services, I can definitely help you do that. So I do offer like workshops, training, and change consulting services. So you can find that at my Passion Pioneers website, so passionpioneers.com.au. So yeah, go and explore all the things that I have. But whatever happens, just know that you are absolutely, in the right place. If you're listening to a podcast like this, you already have so much of that care and that empathy for people and for the experience that they're having and for improving that experience and making it absolutely magic.
Absolutely. And change can be beautiful and magical, and it can be beautiful and magical for the leader and for the team. So thank you so much for sharing all these tips, Lata. And there you go. The audience has all these resources to tap into.
Yeah,
So
we can
thank
put them
you.
in the show notes, right?
We'll put them in the show notes. Absolutely.
Thank you
All
so much for
right.
having me. It was great.
Thank you.